Valerie and Vivian were sisters, but you couldn't find two people more different in behavior and appearance. Valerie was the younger sister. She was a sweet, kind, attentive, and caring girl. But Vivian was a cruel, sly, and very insolent girl who would lie to justify herself or twist situations to her advantage. She always and only thought about herself, and her ego was suffocating. Their parents were surprised they grew up so different because they were raised with the same care, love, and attention. After graduation, Vivian moved out to the big city. She called home rarely and only when she needed something. Valerie graduated from college in her hometown, met a guy, and got married. Mason, Valerie's husband, was an orphan, but Valerie's parents accepted him as their own son, and he took them as his own parents. Valerie and Mason decided to stay there and live near her parents so they could visit and help them whenever necessary. They soon had a daughter, Miranda. Miranda was the only and favorite granddaughter. Valerie's parents spoiled her as much as possible, but she was still not spoiled. She was very honest, fair, and caring. She visited her grandparents often to help them in the garden and greenhouses where they loved to work. From an early age, Miranda understood how her grandparents would get upset if Vivian hadn't called for a long time. Then, when she would call, it was just her asking for money and complaining about her hard life. Vivian's rare visits would be avoided by Miranda and her parents as much as possible. She always brought fights and an unpleasant atmosphere with her. She found ways to get money from her old parents, took the vegetables and fruits from the greenhouses, and left. One day, Miranda's grandfather had a heart attack, got sick, and needed help. Miranda's parents helped her grandma as much as they could. Her father did lots of work around the house. Her mother called Vivian again and again so she'd come for a little while, spend time with her father, and help take care of him. But she always had an excuse to not come. A couple years passed and Vivian had never come. But she did come to the funeral. Unfortunately, she came for more. Valerie overheard her conversation with her mother. "We just buried your father, and you're asking about inheritance? Is that the only reason you came?" "Dear, if you forgot, I'm still alive, so what he had left goes to me," she told her daughter. After that, Vivian gathered her things and left. Miranda's father suddenly passed a couple years later. Miranda was married by then. Her grandparents' home was old and needed constant work, which her father did and now needed serious repairs. Valerie rented out their apartment and moved in with her mom. She decided to save the rental money to pay for a major renovation. Miranda and her husband helped save too. When they had enough, Miranda and her husband hired a construction crew and remodeled the house. It got a second life. Now her mom and grandma didn't need to worry. The house was in good shape and the apartment rent could be spent on what they needed to. So when Miranda's husband was offered a job abroad, they agreed. Miranda had a daughter there. They talked to her mom and grandma every day online and dreamed of going to visit for the summer. Even though Miranda and her husband missed them dearly, they still decided to extend the job contract that had just ended another year. One day, Miranda woke up to her phone ringing. Her mom called and she knew something had happened. Her mom never called like this. Through her mom's tears and cries, she realized her grandma had died. She immediately got ready to leave, but there was a problem. Miranda had never flown. She had a fear of flying and had never gotten over it. She had to take a train with many transfers, so unfortunately, she missed her grandma's funeral. Miranda's husband couldn't go because he still had a couple weeks on his contract, but said he'd come immediately after. Miranda and her daughter went to her grandma's house, but there was no one there. The door had a lock and her mom wouldn't answer her phone. Miranda felt uneasy. Suddenly, she saw a neighbor and called to her. The old woman said that Vivian was at the funeral and fought with Valerie. She walked around with some papers and gathered her things, took Valerie to the apartment, and hung the lock on the house. The neighbor also warned Miranda to be careful with Vivian since she had never done anything good. Miranda immediately went to the apartment when she found her mom in rough shape. The deaths of her father, husband, and now mother had affected her immensely. If she held herself together at first, now she had completely fallen apart. Miranda was worried and told her husband. They decided they needed a specialist's help. Miranda took care of her mom for the next 2 weeks. She found a good doctor who prescribed medicine. Miranda spent all her time with her mom and supported her as best she could. It turned out the papers she heard about from the neighbor were to deny the inheritance. Vivian had decided to use her sister's grief against her and shoved the papers at her, hoping she'd sign them. That was the final blow that wrecked Valerie's psyche. Miranda worried about how her aunt's actions would end. She was upset that this ruthless egomaniac would get the house her family loved so dearly and had invested so much into. Also, she understood Vivian didn't need the house and would sell it immediately just to get money. Miranda talked to her husband, then called Vivian and suggested buying her part of the inheritance, but she said no. She said she needed Valerie to refuse the inheritance and wanted the entire house. That evening, Miranda told her husband about the phone call, and he told her not to worry. If the papers weren't signed yet, she had no rights to get the house or to sell it. And if she tried something, Miranda should just call the police. His contract ended and he immediately flew to them. They decided they couldn't leave Valerie alone, so he didn't extend his contract and went back to work in the local branch. They took care of Valerie, who had gotten much better. Vivian visited sometime later. She was shocked to find them all in the house. She screamed for them to get out, and she wouldn't let them take her mother's house and threatened to call the police. Miranda told her the will left everything to Valerie. She was the one who had supported her all those years. Miranda even felt a bit sorry for Vivian then. She was, for no reason, full of hatred for her own family. Miranda hoped that someday she'd realize it and would be embarrassed. But Miranda was satisfied that justice prevailed, and everyone got what they deserved. Miranda wished Vivian well and hoped her family would never see her again.